Stand in the center of almost any major European city today, and you're standing in two cities at once. One is the city in the photographs, the one on the postcards, the one tourists come for, and one is the city that exists around the corner. Both are real, both have always existed, but something has changed in the last 30 years. In how those two cities relate to each other, in how far apart they've drifted, and in whether anyone in charge is actually thinking about what happens next. Immigration is one of the most politically charged words in the European conversation, which means it's also one of the least clearly examined. This video is an attempt to look at what's actually happening to European cities, their streets, their budgets, their character, and to ask a question that most people on all sides of this debate are avoiding. European cities have been shaped by migration for as long as they've existed. That's not an argument, that's just history. The question this video is asking is different. It's about pace, planning, and what happens when a city changes faster than the systems designed to manage that change. The stakes are real on every side. For cities, the question is whether they can absorb rapid demographic change without losing the coherence, the architectural identity, the civic culture, the fiscal stability that makes them function. For the people arriving, the question is whether they're being set up to integrate or set up to fail. And for the people already there, the question is whether anyone is listening to them at all. Those aren't three separate questions. They're the same question, asked from three different positions. Start with what we know. Europe's cities have always been shaped by people moving into them. In the 19th century, rural populations flooded into industrial cities faster than those cities could build housing, infrastructure, or sanitation. The result was urban crisis, poverty, disease, social breakdown, and eventually a response. Mass public investment in infrastructure, housing, and civic design. The Great Post-War Migration Wave is a closer example. Between 1950 and 1975, millions of people moved from Southern Europe, North Africa, and Turkey into France, Germany, the Netherlands, and the UK. Cities absorbed them. Sometimes well, sometimes very badly. The banlieues of Paris, the Bijlmermeer in Amsterdam, the tower blocks of Birmingham. These were the results of rapid demographic change meeting inadequate planning. Key lesson those decades taught, or should have taught, is that migration itself isn't the variable that determines whether a city thrives or fractures. Planning is the variable. Investment is the variable. Political will is the variable. Cities that planned for demographic change and invested in integration tended to do better than cities that didn't. That finding is consistent across the research. Now zoom forward to the present. Since 2015, Europe has experienced a migration wave significantly larger and faster than anything since the immediate post-war period. Over 6 million people arrived in the EU between 2015 and 2016 alone. And the systems designed to manage that, housing, municipal budgets, urban planning, were not built for that speed. Here's where the conventional debate gets stuck. One side says, migration is destroying European cities, their character, their safety, their finances. The other side says that's fear-mongering. Cities have always changed. Diversity is a strength. Both sides are partially right. And the fact that both sides are partially right is exactly what makes the problem so difficult to solve. Berlin is a useful case study precisely because it contains both realities at once. Neukölln in the 2000s was a neighborhood most Berliners avoided. High unemployment, concentrated poverty, poor school results, visibly deteriorating public space. Today, after sustained investment and a generational shift, parts of it are among the most creatively productive neighborhoods in Europe. The same streets, different outcomes. But investment didn't happen automatically. It happened because local government decided it was worth doing. And in the cities where that decision wasn't made, where rapid demographic change met budget cuts and political paralysis, the story is different. The neighborhood doesn't regenerate, it stratifies. And the longer it stratifies, the harder it becomes to reverse. Amsterdam is worth spending time on because it shows how the same city can contain radically different outcomes in the same period. The historic center, the canals, the gabled houses, the carefully maintained public realm remains one of the most visited urban environments in the world. Property values there have risen sharply. The people who can afford to live there have, in many cases, benefited from that rise. The Bijlmermeer is 40 minutes away by metro. Built in the 1970s as a modernist experiment in mass housing, it became the primary destination for Surinamese and later other non-Western migrants when their previous neighborhoods were demolished in urban renewal projects. It was, for decades, a place the city largely forgot about. High-rise blocks, inadequate public transport, minimal civic investment. The regeneration that eventually came, demolishing the worst blocks, building mixed-income housing, investing in transport and public space, improved things significantly. But it took 30 years and cost the city substantially. The lesson Amsterdam's urban planners drew was direct. Segregation is expensive. Deferred investment always costs more than timely investment. Now look at the fiscal picture across Europe more broadly. Municipal budgets in cities with high migration have faced genuine pressure. Not fabricated pressure, real pressure. Housing costs, language education, social services, healthcare access. These have measurable costs. A 2023 study of German municipalities found that cities receiving the highest numbers of refugees between 2015 and 2020 saw municipal spending rise by an average of 8 to 12% in those years. And culturally, the record is complicated. Neukölln's creative scene, which now draws people from across Europe, was built in large part by the children and grandchildren of Turkish and Arab guest workers. The food culture, the music, the street art, these aren't incidental to the neighborhood's appeal. They're central to it. Erasure of that history to tell a simple story of decline would be straightforwardly wrong. But the counter-argument has its own blind spots. Economic dynamism at the city level doesn't automatically translate to improved conditions at the neighborhood level, or for the long-term working-class residents who bore the costs of rapid change without sharing proportionally in the gains. A city can be thriving on average and failing specific communities simultaneously. Averages hide a lot. So where does that leave us? European cities are changing, demographically, architecturally, culturally, fiscally. That change is real, it's uneven, and it's happening faster in some places than the systems managing it were designed to handle. The people who feel that most acutely are usually the ones with the least political voice. Long-term working-class residents in changing neighborhoods and newly arrived migrants placed in areas with the least infrastructure. What's missing from most of this conversation is the city itself, the physical, designed, built environment, as a serious policy variable. Urban design isn't decoration, it's the infrastructure of daily life. A neighborhood with well-maintained public space, legible streets, adequate parks, and architectural coherence functions differently, socially, psychologically, economically, from one without those things. And those things don't appear by accident. They require decisions, budgets, and political will. It puts the responsibility where the evidence actually places it, on planning, investment, and political decisions that European cities and governments are making or failing to make right now. The city you have is the result of every decision that was made about it, and every decision that wasn't. The question isn't whether European cities are changing. They are. The question is who gets to shape that change, and whether anyone is actually asking that question seriously enough to answer it.